uno, dos, tres. No, I should do that in Hebrew. Why am I doing Echad, shtayim, shalosh,
Before we start this, do you have any comments on why food isn't getting into Gaza? Because there's at
One
least
sec. We are
according
just
to the
now
press.
getting on. We're just now getting on YouTube. Okay, welcome everyone to Torah study. Uh, a comment on Gaza before we begin our Torah study and Sarah blessing this morning. I have very little. As much as I dislike Bibi, I can't bring myself to lie about Israel. Because I dislike him so much. And I do dislike him very much. But I can't pretend that Israel is intentionally starving Gazans when they are not doing that. I cannot pretend they are. I cannot pretend that when Hamas makes up reports that people are murdered by Israel outside of GHF or Gaza Humanitarian Foundation aid sites, so that the media will report it, so that the GHF will go away, so that the UN can take over aid delivery again because the UN works with Hamas. I can't pretend that that isn't the strategy that's taking place through the media.
Well, that makes sense.
I also don't say that no one is hungry in Gaza. I'm sure many people are hungry. It's a conflict zone. There's an active war going on, and in any other situation, those people would have been able to flee, say, to a friendly country like Egypt and hang out in, the way so many people fled Ukraine at the beginning of that conflict. We got some women and children out of conflict zones so that they wouldn't be harmed in what was to become a terrible military conflict. And Poland and Germany and America and other nations took in these people. I always look to see if anybody's there. I hear this phantom thing, but like usually happens in this case, however, Egypt built a big wall and said no Gazans are allowed to come in here. No Gazans will leave Gaza. In fact, the whole world declared there will be no safe haven for these women and children. But it's not our fault that we won't give them safe haven. It's the Jews' fault. It's Israel's fault. Okay, I mean, that's a terrible thing to do and say, a terrible moral burden to place on Israel when it shouldn't rightfully belong there, I would say. And since that's the situation, Israel is now surging aid so that there will not be, and there has not been mass death from starvation. And Israel is now surging aid along with other countries who are delivering aid in varied ways that do not necessarily depend directly on the UN or the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And other agencies have resumed their work feeding people, like Jose Andres's World Central Kitchen, have resumed feeding hot meals to people in different places in the Gaza Strip. Now, again, that doesn't mean nobody's going to be hungry, but again, it's a conflict. Now, Hamas should surrender because they are the government of Gaza. They must surrender, and the world should press them to do so. Now that I've given 6 minutes to that, that's
Well, the fog of war is truly the fog of war. In this case, it's the snowstorm. Snowstorm of propaganda.
There's a lot that it makes it is very difficult to sift through. With that, we will turn to our Torah. In fact, we're in our Tanakh, we're in the Nevi'im, we're in 2 Samuel chapter 21. We will say our blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. If you say amen, you get full credit. We are thankful for this opportunity to study Torah and learn from David in this case. So, okay.
Look what we start with.
Yeah. Yep, and we are starting today with famine. Indeed, Vayehi Ra'av b'yemei David. There was a famine during the reign of David, in the days of David, year after year for 3 years. David inquired of God, and God replied, "It is because of the blood guilt of Saul and his house, for he put some Gibeonites to death." Um, Again, the commentary suggests we used Urim and Tumim, our magic dice. Oh, sorry, not magic dice. Religious again. Our divination tools, essentially. Even though we're not told not to do divination, we are given this one set of quick response uh, divination tools. I don't know what else to call it. That's what that word means. You're trying to determine the intentions of
It's
this
the
line.
I Ching of Hebrew of
Right, yeah, right, yeah. I mean, but in any event, uh, it is convenient, I would say, that David's like, oh, whose fault is it? Saul's. Saul's been gone for a while from the story at this point, right? It's Saul's fault now. The 3 year famine at this point is, oh, somebody opened the door, but they have a key, so my assumption is they know what they're doing. Oh, it's Darcella. Hey, Darcella. Good morning. All right. We are in we are in Second Samuel chapter 21. So we're it's because of Saul. Saul did this terrible thing. He put some people from Givon to death, and so that's why there is famine. Um, the king summoned the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now, the Gibeonites were not of Israelite stock, but a remnant of the Amorites, to whom the Israelites had given an oath. And Saul had tried to wipe them out in his zeal for the people of Israel and Judah. It is interesting. This so there is this interesting parallel, right? This we were talking about famine. We're talking about we mentioned Gaza before, and this issue of what goes on in present day Israel. Um, and here, who are these Givonites? Well, Givon is a place. These aren't people who are Israelites, but who are they? They are the Amorites who are in the land who said, we read about this earlier in Samuel, First Samuel, where they were like, we won't fight. We'll be with you. We're okay if you come through here and you rule all this. Just let us keep living here and don't kill us, and we'll be cool with you and work with you and fight with you and all that stuff. Which is an arrangement modern day Israel has with many peoples. Well, first of all, right, there are peoples like the Circassians and the Druze who fight with Israel, and there were also in 48 there were Arab villages and things from both the Triangle in the north to Abu Ghosh outside Jerusalem that said they don't fight in the army today, but they did say then we won't fight you, don't kill us, and the Haganah of the time just moved past them. They weren't kicked out of their homes. They're Israeli citizens today. They just moved back. They just said, okay, cool. We're going to keep going then. So these are people who live there. And this is kind of a situation that's similar to that. These Givonites are these Amorites who aren't Amorites anymore. Now they're Israelites, but they're not Israelites in the same way. They're another group. And because of that, and because they're now attributing to Saul this kind of um, uh, Saul remembers that this group had not always been, fortunately, uh, totally loyal, but because of the oath we had given, we were forbidden from, from going back and saying, actually, you can't. We were forbidden from going back on our word. Saul kind of was in a way. Saul was like, well, we'll just get rid of these people. Like I'm gonna make. I don't know. I'm going to take them out for the sake of our people in a way. I mean, there's no real good way to put it. They're giving Saul a pretty bad motivation here. Um, but again, if you look at David politically, you could see this. I mean, you could see this as David scapegoating Saul and elevating a minority in order to distract from the issues of the 3-year famine that's going on. So an effort to change the conversation, to remember what that bad King Saul did to these people. Let's make it right because Saul is the bad guy, which worked for David, has worked for, I mean, doesn't sound like the people have a really great memory of the time of Saul. And but what do you think? Does it seem like it's what do you think?
It seems quite reasonable that he wouldn't want the famine to be blamed on him and his faults, because anything that happens is our fault as humans, not God's. Even though God has a different level of functioning than we do, and we no longer blame God for famines or droughts is usually the situation.
Right. Um,
Distraction has been a political tool throughout the ages,
Oh,
and it
no.
remains so.
It's going on in China now. They have
And
terrible
going on
unemployment problem, therefore they're going to take over Taiwan.
um, you know, it is certainly something that happens in the
Oh, yeah.
world today. There's and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, right? I mean,
Exactly.
he may find out this is not always an effective tool.
Yeah.
But
But
let's
then again, if
you know.
it rains after he does what he does, then of course it's correct.
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be easier for him to claim anyway. At that point, he'd be able to say, hey, we did it. Famine is over. Let's
My
go.
actions have brought on the
Right, yeah, I solved the problem. And of course, he must give credit to God, of course, because
But it's his relationship to God that caused. I mean, that's the kind of thing you can.
oh, sure, yeah. Well, okay, so in verse 4, the Gibeonites answered David, we have no claim for gold. Remember, David had said, what shall I do for you? Sorry, in verse 3, I skipped over. David asked the Gibeonites, what shall I do for you? How shall I make expiation, or how shall, effect atonement, so that you may bless God's own people? Right? So, not so much that they will bless them, but rather God will return the blessing to Israel because we have righted this wrong. And the Gibeonites answered him, saying, we have no claim for silver or gold against Saul and his household, and we have no claim on the life of anyone in Israel. And David responded, whatever you say, I will do for you. Okay, so, and to decode this, of course, they're saying, there's nothing, financial payment isn't something that we're looking for here. And that's, it's more, maybe even it's more than money. And we're not looking for, we're not, I mean, it's dangerous for a minority group to start calling for the death of the majority group. That's a bad thing to do because we see that today. It's not good. You do that, and there's going to be a response, and it's usually going to work out poorly for you. So they're like, hey, we don't want to invite, we're not here to say death to the IDF. We're not saying any of that, right? We love everyone in Israel. We're good. We're all good. And David's like, no, I gotta give something to you. Like we gotta work something out. Because if I don't give anything to you, then this whole thing doesn't work, either religiously or politically. None of it works. It only works if I make some kind of gesture.
It's a parallel to sacrificial Judaism, to shed blood.
Well, and also even today, not necessarily you have to shed blood. He starts, it would be great to start with like silver and gold. Monetary compensation is really what the goal is here, or land or something. It doesn't have to be money necessarily. They're not looking to kill people as retribution here necessarily. I think David knows they're not going to ask. Again, that's a really dangerous thing for the Gibeonites to start asking for. Um, uh, there are a lot of people who would react negatively to that. Um, uh, okay, so thereupon they said to the king, "The man who massacred us and planned to exterminate us, uh, so that we should not survive in all the territory of Israel. Let 7 of his male issue be handed over to us. Oy. And we will impale them before God in Gibeah of Saul, the chosen of God." Which, it's just the name of the area. And the king replied, "I will do so." Um, so it seems like David, the commentary here is saying David is um, trying to give them money, trying to work this out so that he can do this and only give them money. But it seems like these people are going to ask for specifically Saul's family members to be killed by them in public in Saul's hometown or in the mountain near Saul's hometown. The king spared, verse 7, the king spared Mephibosheth, um, son of Jonathan, son of Saul, because of the oath before God between the two, between David and Jonathan. Again, Yehonatan ben Shaul, but again, that's just his whole name. Jonathan, son of Saul. So Mephibosheth, not part of this deal, because David promised him long ago he'd always have a seat at his table and he wouldn't kill him. So we can't hand him over to be killed now. Again, that would certainly look bad. Instead, the king took Armoni and Mephibosheth. This is a different Mephibosheth, it must be. The 2 sons that Ritzpah, daughter of Aiah, bore to Saul, and the 5 sons that Merav, daughter of Saul, bore to Adriel, son of Barzillai, the Meholati. Meholatite, I guess. So they're still related to Saul, and he handed them over to the Gibeonites, and they impaled them on the mountain before God. All 7 of them perished at the same time. They were put to death in the first days of the harvest, the beginning of the barley harvest, so around Passover. Then Ritzpah, daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth and spread it on a rock for herself, and she stayed there from the beginning of the harvest until rain from the sky fell on the bodies. She did not let the birds of the sky settle on them by day, or the wild beasts approach by night. David was told what Saul's concubine Ritzpah, daughter of Aiah, had done. And this inspires something in David. This hearing about what she's done does something. David went, in verse 12, David went and took the bones of Saul and of his son Jonathan from the citizens of Yavesh Gilead, who had made off with them from the public square of Beit Shan, where the Philistines had hung them up on the day the Philistines killed Saul at Gilboa. Remember, the Philistines had killed him. They displayed the bodies. They displayed the bones. Then, eventually, the bones, somebody made off with them. They end up in this town of Yavesh Gilead. They stole them back to mark gratitude for Saul, who had saved them from the Ammonites. And so David knew these people who they respected Saul, so they wanted to have his, bones and his son's bones. And David was just like, because what's David going to do? He's not going to show any kind of respect to Saul. But now David says, maybe not. Maybe we got to do this differently. Um, verse 13, he brought up the bones of Saul and of his son Jonathan from there, from Yavesh Gilead, and he gathered the bones of those who had been impaled. And they buried the bones of Saul and of his son Jonathan in Zelah, in the territory of Benjamin, in the tomb of his father Kish. And when all that the king had commanded was done, God responded to the plea of the land thereafter. So, what solves David's and the land's famine is respect for Saul's family. In fact, he started off by going the total opposite direction. He was going to show even more super disrespect to Saul. He's blaming the famine on Saul. He gets all these people killed as some kind of act, but it doesn't work. But he hears about what Ritzpah does, and he says, okay, maybe I'm going about this the wrong way. And he finally ensures that Saul and his son and these other relations that he's responsible for have a decent burial in the place where they're supposed, not in some kind of royal whatever, just in his father's tomb, just a respectful burial, and that solves that problem.
You make an important distinction for me, and I would have missed that. I would have thought the famine was over because David made retribution. Instead, not retribution, penitence, but instead what's being recognized is his feeling for her and for what she's done, rather than his having paid penitence by giving up Saul's relatives.
Yeah, I mean, he's
and it's echoed by the prophets. God responds to compassion,
Yes.
not to hatred.
Yes.
right, and this is an example of that, absolutely. Because like there is a time for the kind of aggression that David often likes to show, and there's a time for other things. And so
And he got rid of would-be enemies, didn't he? Saul's family.
he also happened to, I mean, it worked out that these guys, now he once again managed to get rid of yet more guys that could have challenged his sons later for the throne. That does help, but you know, again, it depends how you see it.
Response, but with rain was due to kindness.
Yes, absolutely.
Also, there's a very narrow reading of verse 4. The Gibeonites answered him, "We have no claim for silver or gold against Saul and his household, and we have no claim on the life of any other man in Israel." I had understood that to mean on the life of any man in Israel.
Me too, but right, it just means, right, it means we don't want gold or silver from them, and we're not going to kill anybody else.
But Saul's family.
But we can, but there is one thing we will take, right, which is killing them. Yes, absolutely. When I first read it, it seemed to me they were excluding killing in general. It does seem they were willing from the start to kill Saul's family. They just were trying to make clear to the majority they weren't interested in killing anyone else. They're not interested in like going to war against the Israelites. Just they hate Saul and his
David
family.
was pretty willing too.
Yeah. He was very happy to
enemy of my enemy.
Right, he was very happy to play along with it. No, absolutely. Okay, so he does nice, and now we get war. In verse 15, Vati od milchama la plishtim. Again, war broke out between the Philistines and Israel, and David and his men with him went down and fought the Philistines. David grew weary. And Ishi Benov, Vayishbi, it says, or Vayishvo. Okay, that's a very weird name. Um, so Ishbi of Nov tried to kill David. He was a descendant of the Rapha. Oh, good. Like the Rephaim that we read about in, right, yeah. So his bronze spear weighed 300 shekels. Look up how much.
And okay, it's the
One sec.
Philistines and
Based on the biblical weight of a shekel, how much would 300 shekels weigh in pounds?
If we convert that to pounds, 1 gram is about 0.02206 pounds.
I don't
So
care.
if we multiply 11 grams by that conversion factor, we get about 0.02425 pounds per shekel. For 300 shekels, that would come out to about 7.27 pounds.
Okay, it's not that big then. His bronze spear weighed 7 pounds.
Even I could lift that.
Right, yeah, right, exactly.
But I'm thinking, he was a descendant of the Rephaim. Is that a throwback to Goliath, who was this monstrous man too?
I forget who they said. I forget who they said Goliath was descended from. He was Goliath was descended from. Oh, I don't remember. He was also descended from somebody. I don't remember. I don't think he was descended from these people. I don't think he was descended from these people. His bronze spear weighed 300 shekels, and he wore new armor. The commentary says the weight of the bronze was roughly 60 kilograms of the spear. I don't know why they think that.
That'd be 120 pounds, roughly.
So
So that's like Goliath who had this.
that's a big,
monstrous-
right? Yeah, that's a big.
That would fit Goliath. The other one would fit us, so.
Right. So there's a commentary thing that says after Joshua's conquest of the land, the verse states, our text states, no giants remained in the land of the children of Israel. They remained only in Gaza, in Gat, which is where Goliath is from, and in Ashdod. So Yishbi might have been the last surviving member of his. In other words, they're trying to say that there were some of these people still around, but they were extremely rare and were dying out. And so is he a member of God? I don't know. It's not, they haven't made that connection yet. And I feel like they would if they or will if they want to. But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, came to his aid. He attacked the Philistine and killed him. It was then that David's men declared to him an oath, "You shall not go with us into battle anymore, lest you extinguish the lamp of Israel." So after this, fighting broke out again with the Philistines at Gov. That was when Sibbechai the Hushatite killed Saph, a descendant of the Rapha. So Saph is another of these people. And Sibbechai the Hushatite is one of David's best warriors. Again, there was fighting with the Philistines at Gov, and Elhanan, son of Yareh or Agim. There's a note here on that. Okay. The Bethlehemite killed Goliath the Gittite, whose spear had a shaft like a weaver's bar. Again, it's not obviously the same Goliath. This is a guy. Philistines probably named that he was a big hero of the Philistines. So a bunch of Philistines probably named their kids after him. It's like, unfortunately, how what the 93rd most popular baby name in the UK is this year for boys? Yahya. Yahya, like Yahya Sinwar.
Oh.
Yeah.
So people name their kids after their heroes.
No.
Anyway, so it's a different Goliath, but there you go. Once again, we're just seeing there's skirmishes, wars. It just keeps on going and going. Um, uh, Once again, there was fighting at Gath. There was a giant of a man who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all. He too was descended from the Rapha. All of a sudden, there's a bunch of these guys, but we're kind of they're trying to kind of give you, I'm assuming, the impression here. This is how they went away. So they kept again. What did they say to David? They said, "We can't let the lamp of Israel go out. You're so important. You can't go out and fight." But the Rafa people don't have this mentality, and they send all of their people out. That's why they keep down, So they end up dying out. He too was born from a giant. When he taunted Israel, Jehonatan, the son of David's brother Shimei, killed him. So Jehonatan's David's nephew, Jonathan, killed this one. Those 4 were descended from the Rapha in Gat, and they fell by the hands of David and his men. So they do seem, probably they are related to Goliath, I would say, in some way, since he was from Gat. And if they're actually all from Gat, then it would be hard, if there are so few, to imagine they're not related. But they don't have to be, I guess. There could have been 2 families.
Goliath intermarriage, and once you have a certain trait, you intermarry.
Sure, yeah.
That has that trait.
I think there's a reprise of the theme of how David overcomes all adversity, huge adversity, in a way is what Goliath represents. What's interesting to me too is that David's brother named his son Jonathan, but not David didn't name his son Jonathan.
I mean, also, yeah, I mean, it's worth noting when David had most of his kids, he was fighting a war with, like, he was on the run from Saul, he was fighting with Saul, and then he beat Saul, but then he beat Saul, so he can't name his kid after the guy who, he didn't really beat Saul, but he took over after Saul. He wasn't really looking, until just now, he wasn't really looking to be that nice to the family of Saul. So, there's certain things he cannot do, but yes, it's nice, interesting, and nice that David's brother name that, maybe because he knows how fond David was of Jonathan, but maybe hoping that his son, especially his son killed a giant and his name Jonathan, maybe David will take special note of him. After all, David's oldest son was killed. The rest of David's kids might be a little skittish at this point about trying to see who's next, especially after there was a rebellion. Nobody really wants to bring up, hey, who comes after you? Since the last guy who brought it up ended up dead, the firstborn was killed by that guy.
Right.
So he's lost 2 sons already. There's there's going to be a question about who of David's remaining sons should be king. And then there's whoever's left from the Saul people beyond that. So there are limits, and maybe you want to throw your kid in the mix and say maybe he takes special notice and says, I don't know, just throwing it out there. Maybe people aren't that manipulative. Maybe I'm just not trustworthy.
People are that
Power.
Right. I just assume they'll do whatever the Game of Thrones characters would do. That's my going assumption. Okay, chapter 22 is a psalm, essentially. Chapter 22 is, he did all those battles we saw at the end of chapter 21, and he did a lot of things. In his, there was a lot going on for David. And we see here in chapter 22, it says, David addressed the words of this song, this shirah, or poem. Shirah can also mean poem, or psalm, we can think of it, after God had saved him from the hands of all his enemies and from the hands of Saul. So in his later years, David finally gets pretty relative tranquility. It's not totally tranquil, but he gets a lot less battles and stuff. And it's at this time that he authors this psalm, and we believe probably started to write all the other psalms. And we think he writes psalms. Why do we think he writes the psalms? Because here's a psalm. It's right here in this. And we read another song earlier he wrote. So he writes these poems, these psalms. That's what he does. We see him do this.
And within the book of Psalms, it says at 75, here ends the Psalms of David.
Right, yeah. I mean, they're right. So we do believe a lot of them.
That's good.
Although then we see later Psalms were probably written earlier than
Sure.
75.
All right.
So it could be that 75 was the last one, and all of them are David, and that's
Yeah.
what the rabbis will say. They'll say that, well, really, even though they're out of order, they're all, we're not saying there are multiple authors of the necessarily. Okay, so that's what happened, and Vayomer Adonai, he said, uh, Adonai, my crag, my fortress, my deliverer, right? Um, oh God, the rock, right? Suri, in which I take shelter. Um, my shield, my mighty champion, my haven and refuge. And again, this is a poem. The translations are going to be very different, because it's very interpretive. Because the literal is like God of my rock. No, that's not really what it means. It means God, my rock. In this case, God, my fortress. My, like my anyway. So yeah. So anyway, my Savior, you who rescue me from violence. All praise, I called on God and was delivered from my enemies. From the breakers of death encompassed, for the breakers of death encompassed me. The torrents of Belial, the netherworld, like death and Sheol, it says, terrified me. The ropes of Sheol encircled me. The snares of death engulfed me. In my anguish, I called on the Eternal, cried out to my God, who from a heavenly abode heard my voice, whose ears received my cry. Then the earth rocked and quaked, the foundations of heaven shook, rocked by divine indignation. Um, Smoke went up from God's nostrils, devouring fire from God's mouth, live coals blazing forth. God bent the sky and came down, thick cloud beneath divine feet. God mounted a cherub and flew and was seen on the wing, gliding on the wings of the wind. Pavilions of darkness all around, dripping clouds, huge thunderheads. Right, to conceal God. In the divine brilliance blazed fiery coals. God thundered from heaven. The Most High gave forth voice, letting shafts fly and scattering them, lightning and routing them. The bed of the sea was exposed. The foundations of the world were laid bare. By the Eternal's mighty roaring, as at the blast of God's breath. Reaching down from on high, God took me, drawing me out of the mighty waters, rescuing me from my fierce enemy, from foes too strong for me. They attacked me on my day of calamity, but God was my support, bringing me out to freedom. Pleased with me enough to rescue me, God rewarded me according to my merit, requiting the cleanness of my hands. For I have kept the ways of God, and have not been guilty before my God. For I am mindful of all God's rules, and have not departed from God's laws. I have been blameless before God, and have guarded myself against sin. And God has requited my merit according to my evident cleanness. With the loyal you deal loyally, with the blameless hero blamelessly. With the pure you act in purity, and with the perverse you are wily, or you act tortuously, or you will treat them as they treat others. To lowly folk you give victory, and you look with scorn on the haughty. You, O Eternal One, are my lamp. God lights up my darkness. With you I can rush a barrier. With my God I can scale a wall. The way of God is perfect. The word of the Eternal is pure. God shields all who seek refuge. Truly, who is a God except the Eternal? Who is a rock except our God? The God, my mighty stronghold, who kept my path secure, who made my legs like a deer's and set me firmly on the heights, who trained my hands for battle, my arms can bend a bow of bronze. You have granted me the shield of your protection, and your providence has made me great. You have let me stride on freely, my feet have not slipped. I pursued my enemies and wiped them out. I did not turn back till I destroyed them. I destroyed them. I struck them down. They rose no more. They lay at my feet. You have girded me with strength for battle, brought low my adversaries before me, made my enemies turn tail before me, my foes, and I wiped them out. They looked, but there was none to deliver. To God who did not answer them. I pounded them like dust of the earth, stamped, crushed them like dirt of the streets. You have kept me from the strife of peoples, kept me to be at the head of nations. Peoples I knew not must serve me, because he did so much conquering. Foreign peoples cringe before me, are submissive at the mere report of me. Foreign peoples lose courage and come trembling out of their strongholds. The Eternal lives. Blessed is my rock. Exalted be God, the rock who gives me victory, the God who has vindicated me and made people subject to me, who has rescued me from my enemies, who raised me clear of my adversaries, saved me from the lawless opposition. For this I sing your praise, Eternal One, among the nations, and hymn your name. Tower of victory to your King, keeping faith with your anointed, with David and his offspring evermore. And so this is, this is a psalm that David offers. By the way, this is not unique to the Jews of this time period.
Mhm.
What is the best record we have of ancient Israel's existence? The first one, the Mesha stele from Egypt, is a Egyptian record of battle, essentially, that says, and I destroyed the people of Israel, right? And I did this because our gods are cool and their God sucks, right? I mean, that's what all the peoples do when they do a big victory and stuff. A king wants to make a record of it. Now, David's was this, and it goes in this form, as opposed to a big stele somewhere, put it on a big rock somewhere. But it's not uncommon for this kind of thing for a king to do. But that's what he said.
Beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's certainly a beautiful poem.
I don't know why I didn't get in the book of Psalms. It's
Needed to be here.
Hmm?
We needed it here. And we cover all this in some. I mean, not this exact, but we do. We get all the him like a deer. We get all the same metaphors throughout. Like it is sprinkled throughout in its own. Yeah.
And I love the image of manhood that's put forward here, of humanity that's put forward.
Yeah.
Man is a warrior. Man is also a man who goes within himself and can be a poet and know his deep feelings, and who recognizes that whatever he has, he owes to God.
Yeah, and it's again, it's not a humble poem, right? It is very much like, look at all this cool stuff we did together.
Yeah.
But it's a better model than the absolute ruler who says, look at all the cool stuff I do.
Yeah. And
Where everything is relative. In this case, David is anchoring himself to something, and that something is God. And he's saying, I don't deviate from you. I'm not like, I beat these people because I was like this, and then I did this because I'm like this, but the anchor is me. Wherever I am is the center. David's like, no, I stayed here because God is the center. And because of that, I did really cool stuff.
You can't name any Caesar that did poetry or gave.
Really? Didn't Marcus Aurelius do poetry?
I thought he just did philosophy, but
Oh, sorry. I mean, I sorry. To me, that I kind of think it's the same thing. Philosophy and poetry to me
doesn't have metrics, and this.
No, I know. I know. I'm sorry. I know. It's we'll talk more about it in book club with the Heschel and the religion and philosophy. But like, philosophy. Yeah, I think he did also write some poetry, though. I think there were some emperors that did that, but later emperors, not the early ones. I don't think, and not. I don't know of Caesar writing a lot of poetry, like Julius Caesar.
Yeah. Obviously, if a lot of the Psalms, and this is attributed to David, he overshadowed anybody that I know.
He was a pretty prolific writer for a king, certainly. At least until more modern times. I think a couple of the more modern kings around the world, since they don't have to do anything professionally, have written some books and stuff. But But David had a lot of work to do also. He he actually ruled his nation. He didn't just reign theoretically over there somewhere. Um, anyway,
He
sorry.
didn't have a parliament to make laws.
Right, yeah, he wasn't a constitutional monarch. He was a divinely appointed monarch. Yeah.
The psychiatrist speaks the message of health. You have to be strong and face and act in the world. You have to have the courage to go within and face yourself, and you have to have spirituality and
Absolutely.
God.
And not be arrogant. It's the
And this, in the end, is part of why David is a good. Again, David is not. We talk about him and we love to throw complexity at David, and that's great. I'm all for it. But this is why David is a hero.
Yes.
This is why David is one of the people we want our sons to emulate. May God make my sons like not just Ephraim and Manasseh, but like Joshua and David, like leaders of our people. And so here we get chapter 23, the last words of David, Ve'ela divrei David ve'acharonim. Um, um, and we even get a Ne'um David, which I think is interesting because Ne'um is one of the statements you're going to start seeing a lot when prophets speak. They're going to say Ne'um Adonai, in other words, like this is the word of God. But it's a specific phrasing in Hebrew to start that. It's interesting. I don't think we've seen this yet. That it's like Naum David ben Yishai, Naum Hagever Hukam Al Mashiach Elohai Yaakov Unim Zmirot Yisrael. Right. So what is that? These are the last words of David. The words of, again, it says the utterance is how they're translating Ne'um. But it's like this, it's the powerful statement of David, son of Yishai, which is what you see in a verse of Lachado D, I'm gonna bring in more often, but we don't really do in the Reform movement. Right? We ask for the arrival of Ben Yishai Beit Halachmi, right? The son of Yishai, the Bethlehemite. Who are we talking about? We're talking about the descendant of David. The descent, because David is the son of Yishai.
Right.
Or Jesse, I guess. I don't really know how we get Jesse from Yishai, but anyway, the Ne'um of the man set on high. Right? Hagever Hukam. The anointed, Hamashiach, al Mashiach, the anointed Elohai Yaakov, of the God of Jacob, and the favorite, or the pleasing one, Unneim, right? What do we say when it's very pleasant to meet someone? Na'im me'od. This is the same root here.
I'm pleased to meet you.
Right, exactly. Very pleasing. So, and in this case, it's so pleasing. It's the most pleasing. So it's unim, and the favorite, Zmirot, or songster, or poet is really what this means here. Yisrael, the one, everyone, right. Another translation, Steinsaltz says the sweet singer of Israel. So it's like the most favorite singer. It's not necessarily here. Another translation is the favorite of the songs of Israel. Zmirot means songs, yes, but in this case it means, because of the grammar, I think it more accurately means his poetry, his music, because again, he also played the lyre, right? He's Benevo Vechino, right? He played a lot of music. So he's right. So some of this may have been set to music. The Spirit of God has spoken through me. God's message is on my tongue. And again, this is why we got Ne'um before. He's kind of saying, my words were inspired by a spirit, kind of like how a prophet is inspired. He's not quite calling himself a prophet, but he's saying he's the only king to kind of get to the level of almost being both. He's kind of, saying the God of Israel has spoken. The Rock of Israel said concerning me, he who rules over people justly, he who rules in awe of God, is like the light of morning at sunrise, a morning without clouds, through sunshine and rain, bringing vegetation out of the earth. Is not my house established before God? For I have been granted an eternal pact, drawn up in full and secured. Will God not cause all my success and my every desire to bloom? But the wicked shall all be raked aside like thorns, for no one will take them in his hand. Whoever touches them must arm himself with iron and a shaft of a spear, and they must be burned up on the spot, right? That's how you deal with thorny bushes. You got to put on metal because they'll hurt you. So he's calling the wicked like them. Again, you're going to see a lot of things like morning sunrise, thorn bushes that are going to be imagery that Christians are later going to take, and because again, there need to be things that tie David to Jesus. So they're going to take symbology that is tied to David and just be like, well, if we find a way to put this on him, in him, with him, it will reinforce the connection that we're trying to make. Anyone who wants to be Messiah has to connect to David.
That's where the crown of thorns comes in for the Christians.
Right. Right. So the name. So okay, and they must be burned up on the spot. Okay. So that's the end of that bit there. These are the names of David's warriors. We have Yoshev Bashevet, a Tachkemoni. I'm just looking at the Hebrew because that word in English looks like a stroke to try and say out loud. The chief officer, he is Adino the Esnite. He wielded his spear against 800 and slew them on one occasion. So we're getting like his top officers and military people. Next to him was Eleazar, son of Dodo, son of Ahohi. He was one of the three warriors with David when they defied the Philistines gathered there for battle. Israel's force retreated, but he held his ground. He struck down Philistines until his arm grew tired and his hand stuck to his sword, and God wrought a great victory that day. Then the troops came back to him, but only to strip only after the battle had stopped. Yeah. Next to him was Shammah, son of Agag, the Ararite. The Philistines had gathered in force where there was a plot of ground full of lentils, and the troops fled from the Philistines. But Shammah took his stand in the middle of the plot and defended it, and he routed the Philistines. Thus God wrought a great victory, or delivered a great salvation. Once during the harvest, 3 of the 30 chiefs went down to David at the cave of Adullam, while a force of Philistines was encamped in the valley of Rephaim, just southwest of Jerusalem. David was then in the stronghold, and a Philistine garrison was then at Bethlehem. Yikes. David felt a craving and said, if only I could get a drink of water from the cistern that is by the gate of Bethlehem. So the 3 warriors got through the Philistine camp and drew water from the cistern that is by the gate of Bethlehem, and they carried it back. But when they brought it to David, he would not drink it, and he poured it out as a libation to God. For he said, God forbid that I should do this. Can I drink the blood of the men who went at the risk of their lives? So he would not drink it. Such were the exploits of the 3 warriors. In other words, you guys were foolish a little bit, and I shouldn't drink this. We shouldn't risk our lives for such things. Nonetheless, it's a story of heroism and their heroes.
This seems like a reprise of all the heroic things.
It's kind of like a montage at the end of the story, right? David did his big last psalm, he did the thing, and now we're getting this, right? We're getting a montage. It's kind of like going through some of the heroes that littered the journey. Right.
In music, we call it a coda, and you can have all the themes of the symphony.
Right. Yeah. Right. So this is so we're kind of getting this here. And now we get Avishai in verse 18, brother of Yoav. Remember Yoav,
Yeah.
son of Zeruiah, was head of another 3. Sometimes they'd have these teams of squads, 3 Anyway, he once wielded his spear against 300 and slew them. He won a name among these three great warriors, since he was the most highly regarded among these three, and he became their leader. However, he did not attain to the three. He didn't go. He didn't go to Bethlehem with them. Um, and he was more of a commander than like a ground guy. Benaniah, son of Yehoiada. That's better than. Why would they do it this way? Jehoiada, I don't know. From Kabzeel, was a brave soldier who performed great deeds. He killed two sons of Ariel of Moab. Once, on a snowy day, he went down into a pit and killed a lion. He also killed an Egyptian, a huge man. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand, yet Benaniah went down against him with a club, wrenched the spear out of the Egyptian's hand, and killed him with his own spear. Damn. Such were the exploits of Benaniah, son of Jehoiada. He won a name among the three warriors. He was highly regarded among the 30, but he did not attain to the three. He didn't reach the three top warriors of David, but he reached this other group. David put him in charge of his bodyguard. Among the 30, again, we're just going to get the names of all of them. So if you want to go read them, you're welcome to. I'm going to keep skipping through. You can read. They're not even telling us their stories. These are just, one of them is the arms bearer of Yoav. But that's it. And by the way, the last one is worth looking at verse 39.
Oh, Uriah. Yeah. Well, isn't that striking? Yeah.
So the last one is Uriah the Hittite. Nothing else is said about that. Just
Yeah.
there are possible that there were other mighty men, as they're calling this group of people, because they're not. Some of them are commanders, some of them are infantry, some of them are, they're all in different parts, but they're all his dudes. It did a whole thing and threw me out of 2 Samuel. Okay, now for the last chapter.
Oh, and then we get to Kings.
Yep. The last chapter of Samuel. So God's anger again flared up against Israel, and God incited David against them, saying, "Go and number Israel and Judah." The king said to Yoav, his army commander, make the rounds of all the tribes of Israel from Dan to Beersheba and take a census of the people so that I may know the size of the population. Yoav answered the king, "May the eternal your God increase the number of the people 100-fold, while your own eyes see it. But why should my lord the king want this?" However, the king's command to Yoav and to the officers of the army remained firm. And Yoav this is a big undertaking to go count everybody in this time. You couldn't just send mail. There wasn't a mail system, right? You paid for a messenger if you wanted something sent somewhere. And Yoav and the officers of the army set out at the king's behest to take a census of the people of Israel. They crossed the Jordan and encamped at Aroer on the right side of the town, which is in the middle of the Wadi of God, and went on to Yazer. They continued to Gilead into the region of Tatim Hodshi. They came to Dan Ya'an, and around to Sidon. And they went on to the fortress of Tyre. Again, Sidon and Tyre were part of his kingdom at this point. That's Lebanon by anyone's recognition today, by far. Nobody's talking about returning to the Davidic kingdom that included Sidon and Tyre, or later Damascus, right? But we're getting a sense of the whole region he conquered here. And all the towns of the Hivites and Canaanites, and finished at Beersheba in southern Judah. They traversed the whole country, and then they came back to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. It took almost 10 months. Yoav reported to the king the number of the people that had been recorded. In Israel, there were 800,000 soldiers ready to draw the sword, and Judah's contingent numbered 500,000,
And these are just the men folk.
ready for military service. Yes.
The draftees of our day.
Right. And in the census, because Judah is so much bigger than all the other tribes
Yeah.
combined, they have a separate count for Judah, as they did in the days of Saul. So Judah's territory has its own count, which is 500. Hence why they can work out to basically be co-equal kingdoms after Solomon, because they basically work out to be about the same size. So one has 800,000 right now, one has 500,000 right now. But afterward, David reproached himself for having numbered the people. Remember, what are we not supposed to do? What did I make up the SpongeBob thing to teach everybody? We don't count people in Judaism. It's just, we don't do it. Instead, when we want to count a minion, we recite 10 words of a psalm or a verse or something, which I said is why you could do "Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?" SpongeBob SquarePants. It's also 10 words. But whatever you do, it has to be 10 words. And that's how you count to a minion. Because you don't go, God forbid, 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't do that. So there's this idea, we do a lot of censuses, but then there's this idea that we're not supposed to count the people exactly. Maybe we're keeping track of, not trying to say, did we really number the stars of the sky or the sands of the sea? Right? Because that's what God's promise was, how big. Maybe we don't want to see like we're keeping tabs on God, but in
It
any event.
implies you can rely on your own force and not of God, and
Maybe
God does with Gideon in Judges. He kept paring it down, and so it was God's victory.
Right. Right. So, and David said to God, I have sinned grievously in what I have done. Please, O God, remit the guilt of your servant, for I have acted foolishly. When David rose in the morning, the word of God had come to the prophet Gad, David's seer. Now, this was like his personal seer. Nathan was the major prophet at this point. Nathan. Go and tell David, thus says God, Ko Amar Adonai, I hold 3 things over you. Choose one of them, and I will bring it upon you. So here are one of the 3 punishments for the census.
Can we stop for a moment? Okay, David is saying he's reproaching himself and saying he sinned because he numbered the people, and yet he was instructed in the first verse, go and number Israel.
Yes, because he wasn't commanded to. If God commands you to do it, then God commanded you to do it, especially if there's about to be a war. But if here it's like maybe God was angry. It wasn't necessarily a war. It's an unnecessary census. It was a foolish, and he says it was merely an expression of pretension.
It'd be like if we tried to read.
He just wanted to know how big he'd gotten, right? And so he sent the army out everywhere. It was this huge undertaking. It was the wrong thing to do, I guess. It was foolish.
Ego enlargement.
Right. So God came, right. He said, Gad came to David and told him, he asked, shall a 7-year famine come upon you in the land? Or shall you be in flight from your adversaries for 3 months while they pursue you? Or shall there be 3 days of pestilence in your land? Now consider carefully what reply I shall take back to the one who sent me. And of course, the sender is God. David said to Gad, I am in great distress. Let us fall into the hands of God, whose compassion is great, and let me not fall into human hands. Now, what's he really saying here?
Could be he's asking for mercy.
He's asking for mercy, but he is asking for mercy by asking for the worst one. He's going to say, I think pestilence is the worst one. Or at least it's the one most dependent on God. It's only 3 days. God can be as merciful as God wants, and hopefully it won't be too bad. So so we know that he's asking for the pestilence option. So verse 15, God sent a pestilence upon Israel from morning until the set time, and 70,000 of the people died from Dan to Beersheba. But when the angel extended a hand against Jerusalem to destroy it, God renounced further punishment and said to the angel who was destroying the people, "Enough, stay your hand." The angel of God was then by the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. Aravna, sorry, I don't know why it says Araunah. Oh, because that's the alternative. When God saw the angel who was striking down the people, he said to God, "I alone am guilty. I alone have done wrong. But these poor sheep, what have they done? Let your hand fall upon me and my father's house." Right? He's saying, okay, you can get me, but 70,000 people, that's a lot. Gad came to David the same day and said to him, "Go and set up an altar to God on the threshing floor of Aravna the Jebusite, where you saw the angel." David went up, following Gad's instructions as God had commanded. Aravna looked out and saw the king and his courtiers approaching him. So Aravna went out and bowed low to the king with his face to the ground. And Aravna asked, "What has my lord the king come to his servant?" "Why?" David replied, "To buy the threshing floor from you, that I may build an altar to God, and that the plague against the people may be checked." And Aravna said to David, "Let my lord the king take it and offer up whatever he sees fit. Here are oxen for a burnt offering, and the threshing boards and the gear of the oxen for wood. All this, O king, Aravna gives to your majesty, and may the eternal your God," Aravna added, "respond to you with favor." But the king replied to Aravna, "No, I will buy them from you at a price. I cannot sacrifice to the eternal my God burnt offerings that have cost me nothing." So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen for 50 shekels of silver, a very good price. Right? And this is reminiscent of course, Abraham, who was offered the cave of Machpelah as a burial place, but he said, "No, it doesn't mean anything if I'm given it for nothing. I have to pay."
And I want a contract that says.
Well, yes, in that case also, right, yeah, in that case, there was also in this case, though, I have to do this. It's got to be on me.
Yeah.
It can't be recorded that this was really Aravna's, the Jebusite's sacrifice, right? So he bought it. And David built there an altar to God and sacrificed burnt offerings and offerings of well-being. God responded to the plea for the land, and the plague against Israel was checked.
I'm struck by a couple of things, Rabbi, and a question.
Sure.
The angel of death stopped at Jerusalem. Jerusalem is always so precious to God, it should not be harmed. Also, I can't recall at this point. David hadn't conquered Jerusalem yet, had he? It was still in the hands of the Jebusites?
No, not anymore. But there were still some Jebusites around around the area of Jerusalem and stuff.
Okay, but he had taken it.
Oh yeah, he built a palace there. He just wasn't allowed to build a temple.
Right.
But he's done a ton of this, or he's built a temporary palace at this. I mean, remember, he's built, and also you got to remember he's going to keep doing things throughout the latter half of his reign. We're going to do a time jump, and at the beginning of Kings, we're going to start at now. David was a very old man, and now we're going to be moving out of David and into Solomon. But we're going to skip now because David wasn't that old when we left him. Even at this last, he did the thing with Saul's bones, but this last few chapters was. He settles business with Saul's family. He calms down. He starts to write Psalms. And he does this thing, they tell one more story. They do this compilation of all the people who filled his life in battles. And then they tell one more story. It's a random story. It's not the ultimate story. It's not the last story. It's just a story about David and how sometimes David makes a mistake, but that he feels badly about it, he repents for it, and he makes atonement to God, always at any personal cost that it will take. Offering up even, which he'd done once before, offering up even his own life if it means sparing the lives of his people. So it's just meant to be a story that makes you see David, see David. Before we're going to move away from David, because when we start the next book, we're really done with the stories of David. David's going to be old, and it's going to be time to start looking for who replaces David, because the story must go on, because no man lives forever. So that's the story of David, Melech Yisrael. Chai v'kayam is kind of messianic. That's like David, King of Israel. Live and arise, right? Right? We're really calling when we sing that song. You know that song, everybody? David Melech Yisrael, Chai v'kayam. David Melech Yisrael, Chai v'kayam.
Like that.
Right. So it's a camp song, people anyway, but it's King David, King of Israel, but Chai v'kayam is also what we say about God, and right? We say El Chai v'kayam, Tamid Yimloch Aleinu Leolam Va'ed, may you reign over, right? That's Ma'ariv Aravim. Right, yes. Right. Melech Chai v'kayam, right. So that's again a king living and established. Kayam means to rise up or to rise, but also to be established and like to be firm. So here we've got when we do that, it's a little right. David Melech Yisrael Chai v'kayam is a little like gets a little to the, but we get a little to the edge of idolatry with messianism sometimes. It's what pushed the early reformers who wrote in the Pittsburgh Platform of the 1880s, of 1886, that we don't envision nor desire, right, we don't believe in a personage of the Messiah, but rather a messianic age, because they were so uncomfortable with the idea of this figure, this messianic personage. They didn't enjoy what it had done vis-a-vis Christianity, and they wanted to move as far away from that as possible. These days, I think a lot of people are just more agnostic about Messiah. I think they're like, we don't know. We'll see what happens. When it's something to worry about, we'll worry about it. Until then, no need to bother with Messiah for now.
None of us are saying Bibi is the Messiah.
I don't think anyone here is saying Bibi is the Messiah. I don't think anyone. Again, it's a whole thing. He's a whole thing. But no, I don't think anyone is saying Bibi is the Messiah. Okay, well, that will do it for our study this morning.
And we meet again in 2 weeks?
Indeed, I believe we do.
Great.
I will check.